Hello everyone, in this video I would like to present my research entitled Xenophobia and its relation to polygamy in France, written by me and my corresponding author, Mrs. Airin Miranda. And through this presentation, I hope to provide a little bit more insight about xenophobia against Muslims and polygamy that exists in France. First of all, based on the Oxford Dictionary, xenophobia against Muslims or Islamophobia refers to fear, prejudice, hatred, and discrimination against Islam or Muslims. In the Muslim community itself, polygamy is seen as one of a lifestyle that is based on the cultural practices and beliefs of Muslims in Africa, because it is supported by their religious doctrine. Muslims who practice polygamy refer to the verse of the Quran which states that a man can marry up to 4 wives on condition that they are fair. Therefore, the practice of polygamy is a lifestyle that has been accepted as part of religion and culture. Furthermore, it's also seen as the norm in Muslim-dominated African countries. In France, the practice of polygamy emerged since the 1970s along with the regroupement familial, or the reunification of immigrant families, especially those from the African continent. A law called L'arrêt Monchot, issued in 1980 by the Council of the State, established immigrant housing, also known as habitation loyer modérée, which provided sufficient space for large numbers of polygamous families to arrive. Over the years, numerous surveys have been done in France to determine the people's views on various religious groups. Pew Research Center in 2008 conducted a survey in which 38% of the respondents said that they had a somewhat or very unfavorable opinion of Muslims. This number indicated an increase from the previous years because in 2006, 35% of respondents said that they had an unfavorable opinions of Muslims. But in 2005, it was only 34%. A new survey was also conducted in 2014 that asked respondents specifically about religious groups in France. 27% of respondents stated that Islam is an intolerant religion and also incompatible with the values of French society. The Collective Against Islamophobia in France conducted a survey after the shooting at Charlie Hebdo's offices in January 2015 that showed Islamophobic acts has increased by 18.5% from the previous year, with 905 recorded cases of Islamophobia. The incident also exacerbated perceptions or opinions about Muslims and the Islamic religion, which are synonymous with radicalism, extremism, terrorism, and separatism in France. This is also evidenced by the enactment of a new policy by Emmanuel Macron in December 2020, which is aimed towards Muslim immigrants. This policy has drawn criticism from the public, especially from the Muslim community, because it was initiated right after the attack on a French teacher named Samuel Paty, who was beheaded by terrorists for showing a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad in class. A series of policies implemented by the government to address the practice of polygamy that still exists in France focuses on enforcing sanctions against polygamous practices, especially in the forms of decohabitation, relocation, separation of immigrant families, revocation of entry rights, asylum rights, and residency rights. These sanctions against polygamy were set because it is basically a deviation from Article 147 of the Civil Code, which underlies the principle of monogamy in France. These increasingly strict government policies are also an indication of increasing French sentiment towards Muslim immigrants, given the high number of polygamy are related to the arrival of immigrants from Islamic countries. This is one of the cases of illegal polygamy in 2010 that shows polygamy makes families vulnerable to poverty and internal problems, which happen because the needs of children and wives are not being fairly met and the distribution of living space is not equal. Large polygamous immigrant families live in slum areas and are even uninhabitable. This is proven to cause difficulties not only for those who are involved in polygamous situations, but also for the government, especially regarding the distribution of subsidies in the health and education sectors. Not only that, the existence of criminal cases related to polygamy also further discredits Muslim immigrants in the eyes of France, which is supported by the following chart. Islamophobic acts and threats represented by the color orange in the chart have only been counted since 2010. That indicates Islamophobia or anti-Muslim racism coincides in the same year with the previously shown case. Islamophobia in France has since increased along with the peak of illegal cases of polygamy, which proves that polygamy in France affected the increase in xenophobia that French people have towards Muslim immigrants and Islam in general. These two consecutive cases of denying social security by the court implies the inherent prejudice towards Muslim immigrants, especially women, as perpetrators and victims of polygamy. This is due to the fact that the women who were involved in polygamy in the first case indirectly affected the women in the second case to not be able to get the benefits that should have been her right. It also shows that those women most likely experience discrimination due to the generalizations that Muslim immigrants are almost always identified with polygamy, even though that is not always the case. That makes polygamy as an indirect factor of generalizations that can result in discrimination of Muslim immigrants, which is a manifestation of xenophobia against Muslims or Islamophobia. The increase of polygamy in France is also the cause for policies and prohibitions on Muslim cultural expressions which were imposed both in the government of Nicolas Sarkozy to the government of Emmanuel Macron. Especially during Macron's time, the policy that regulates polygamy is said to combat radicalism, which implied that polygamy is synonymous with radicalism. Therefore, these policies reflect France's attitude to normalize xenophobia against Muslims because these policies cannot be separated from the existence of polygamy as one of its factors. Finally, this research shows that the correlation between polygamy as a cause for xenophobia against Muslims in France are polygamy being one of the factors that leads to the set of policies normalizing xenophobia against Muslims. This is due to the fact that the expression of Muslims are not facilitated by the French government, which leads the government to make policies that are counterproductive to the Muslim community and instead seems to target them. Polygamy also goes against the values reflected in French policy and society, violates women's rights, and provides an opening for administrative abuses. This is one of the reasons for the difficulty of Muslims to be integrated and accepted in French society, which also places the Muslim community in an inferior position compared to the secular French society.